in the very middle of an oasis, where luxuriant trees temper the sun's scorching rays, and where the life-giving waters of the river Barada come roaring down from Mount Hermon, changing the burning desert sands into a tropical paradise, lies Damascus. Right at the edge of the Arabian desert. Here the soil is so rich that even the laziest farmer can make a good living with his crude old plow. Damascus is the oldest inhabited city on earth. We can trace its history back 4,500 years.
Syria has been a center of civilization for thousands of years. But the secret to its enduring importance lies in its geography. It's nestled between the Mediterranean Sea and the fertile plains of the Levant on the west, and bordered by the Euphrates River to the east, both serving as a kind of natural bridge connecting Mesopotamia, Anatolia, and Egypt to Syria, three of the ancient world's most powerful civilizations. Damascus, its capital, has evidence of human presence dating back 10,000 years and is considered one of the oldest continuously lived cities in the world. And the region itself was where some of the first alphabets were developed. Long before the modern borders, this area was a center of trade, agriculture, and civilization. The borders of the modern Syrian state roughly match this ancient region. But what does Syria really mean? The name itself goes back to ancient times. The term Syria was the Greek name for the region. The ancient Greeks originally referred to this area as Syria because of their encounters with the mighty Assyrian Empire. However, even after the Assyrian Empire collapsed, the Greeks continued using this name to describe the people in the western part of what had been the Assyrian Empire. Over time, Syria simply came to refer to the region as a whole. And interestingly, the Assyrians today are a distinct ethnic group separate from Syrians and are primarily spread across northeastern Syria, northern Iraq, and northwestern Iran. For thousands of years, this land has been ruled by different empires, such as the Hittites, the Persians, the Greeks under Alexander the Great, who toppled the Persian Empire and took over Syria from them, held it for a few hundred years until the Romans came and conquered Syria from them. During the Roman era, Syria was a very important province. It was a trade hub. It was an economical powerhouse with very fertile land. And there would even be 3 Roman emperors who were Syrian. That's how important this region was to the Roman Empire. And later, under the Eastern Roman or Byzantine Empire, Syria was heavily Christianized, and some of the world's oldest churches, such as the Dura Europos Church, which was built in around 250, were located in Syria. There are still remnants of Syria's Christian heritage persisting, mainly in the town of Malula, where the Aramaic language, believed to have been spoken by Jesus, still remains in use by the local people. In the year 634, the Arab armies conquered Syria from the Byzantines and brought it into the Arab Empire. The Arabic name for the region wasn't Syria. They called it Al-Sham, which loosely translates to the left of, because from the Arabian Peninsula, on early maps, from their perspective, Syria was to their left. That's why one of the main rebel groups today that took power in Syria is called Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which means the Organization for the Liberation of al-Sham, aka Syria. Within a few decades, the Arab Empire expanded extremely fast to unprecedented proportions, spanning from Spain to the borders of India. Up until this point, it was the biggest empire that had existed. There would be bigger empires in the future, like the Mongol Empire or the British Empire, but up until this point, it was the biggest to have existed. And very soon, within 200 years, the empire began to fragment into smaller sultanates, and after 400 years, for all intents and purposes, the Arab Empire no longer existed as a power itself. One of the most powerful sultanates that emerged were the Mamluks, who controlled most of Egypt and Syria. In Arabic, Mamluk literally means owned. They were slaves captured as boys from villages in the Caucasus region and the Eurasian steppe around what is modern-day Chechnya, Dagestan. They were brought to Egypt and Syria, converted to Islam, and trained rigorously in warfare, and formed the elite backbone of Muslim armies for centuries. But the Mamluks eventually overthrew their masters and took control for themselves, and they hold a special place in history for defeating the Mongols at the Battle of Ain Jalut in 1260. The Mamluks would control Syria until the 1500s, when a new Muslim power emerged that wasn't Arab and didn't speak Arabic. The Ottoman Turks were very successful militarily, capturing large swaths of land and expanding in the 1500s, and they would eventually invade and take over Syria, marking the beginning of what would be 400 years of Ottoman rule. The Ottomans didn't actually call themselves the Ottoman Empire. That's a name that historians gave to them later on. They actually referred to themselves as the Sultanate of Rum. And Rum is just how they pronounced Rome in their language. They saw themselves as the successors of the Roman Empire, especially after they captured Constantinople. But they saw themselves as a kind of Muslim version of the Roman Empire. So after 400 years of Ottoman rule, we get to World War I, where the Ottomans sided with Germany and Austria-Hungary. At this point, the Ottoman Empire was collapsing, and many of the other Western powers could see that. Britain and France saw it as the perfect opportunity to carve up the territories of this collapsing empire for themselves. And they even enlisted support from the local Arab leaders, promising them independence for revolting against Ottoman rule. But behind the scenes, the British and the French had other plans. In a secret deal known to history as the Sykes-Picot Agreement, Britain, France, and Russia agreed to carve up territories of the collapsing Ottoman Empire amongst themselves. Russia was to be given part of Armenia, Britain was to be given Palestine and Iraq, while France would take Lebanon and Syria. So by the end of the war, France was given control of Syria under a League of Nations mandate. The mandate was intended to be temporary, but when the French arrived, they encountered a deeply divided Syria. The Sunni Muslim majority shared the country with a mosaic of other groups. You had Christians, Kurds, who are ethno-linguistically related to Persians. You have the Druze and the Alawites, who at the time were thought of as a fierce and unruly mountain people who frequently resisted paying taxes and enlisting in the army in Ottoman times. But the Alawites found an ally in the French. The French heavily recruited Alawites into their colonial military and police forces, mainly in the 1930s and 40s. This not only strengthened French control of Syria, but it also gave the impoverished Alawites a pathway to more power. And the region where the Alawites were from in northwestern Syria, Latakia, this coastal region was really important to French rule. They naturally found an ally in the Alawites who came from there. So the Alawites that France began to recruit as policemen and into their military became officers. And they formed the backbone of the military apparatus that would emerge in the 1960s. But eventually in World War II, once Germany occupied France, it weakened France's control over its overseas territories. And by 1946, there was a lot of pressure on France to let go, especially of Syria. So finally in 1946, Syria officially kicked out the French and gained their independence. Everyone was celebrating, waving their flags. But things went south very quickly, and the new government couldn't hold it together. It was coup after coup, one general overthrowing another. And by the late 1950s, things were so bad that Syria basically went to Egypt and said, let's form a union, and formed the United Arab Republic in 1958, which was supposed to be the start of a grand Arab nationalist dream with Gamal Abdel Nasser, but it also flopped. The Egyptians were dominating the union from the beginning, and the Syrians felt like they were getting the short end of the stick. So just after 3 years, the union collapses. And then they go back to the coups, and every few years, someone new is seizing power. Until 1970, when an Alawite fighter pilot by the name of Hafez al-Assad stepped in. He was a military guy through and through, but he was also very smart, and he pulled off this smooth, bloodless coup and declared himself as president. And Hafez al-Assad, from experience, he knew the game, and he knew that they were just going to stage a coup against him. So the first thing he did was he built this really intense intelligence network called the Mukhabarat to spy on basically everyone in the country. He was a little bit paranoid for people to try to overthrow him, but at the same time, this was because he was from the Alawite minority ruling over a Sunni majority, so he was always thinking how to keep his grip on power. And the way he maintained power was by putting his own people, Alawites, into top military and intelligence positions, so they had all the guns and the secrets, but he also gave key political and government positions to Sunnis to keep them happy. And it was this balancing act that he was able to somehow maintain power in Syria. Then fast forward to 1982, the Muslim Brotherhood in Syria, they rose up against Hafez al-Assad. They were fed up with his secular government, and they felt that the Sunnis were getting sidelined, and they staged this rebellion in the city of Hama. And Hafez al-Assad responded absolutely ruthlessly. He sent in the army, surrounded the city, and leveled it with artillery, airstrikes, the whole works. And thousands of people died, maybe tens of thousands. The city was practically erased. And after that, nobody thought of staging a rebellion against Hafez al-Assad ever again. His family would rule Syria for the next 50 years until their regime was finally overthrown in December of 2024. And now Syria stands at a crossroads. Some see this as a chance for a new beginning, while others worry about what comes next. But with so many groups vying for power, the future remains uncertain. But one thing is clear: Syria's story is far from over.